Hello, test check 1, 2. How is it sounding? Let's try that one more time. Now that the sound should be working better. Still sounds a little weird to me, but maybe I just need to talk louder. Turn myself up a little bit there. And let's get this thing going. All right, there I am. We have arrived. Hello and welcome to another Monday afternoon Ableton Office Hours live stream. My name is Zaak Kerstetter. I'm an Ableton Certified Trainer. And this is what I do here on Mondays is I come in with my live open and I'm here to field any questions you may have about making music with live. These can either be very specific to something you're just curious about or just general, music related topics. It is 100% totally up to you. So if you, if anything pops up during the stream, feel free to toss those questions in chat and yeah, I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. So I can't promise I will be able to answer everybody's questions. So generally when I start these streams, I don't really have something in mind or something I want to talk about. However, today I do want to talk a little bit about electric. Electric is a really fantastic synthesizer that a lot of people just don't really use or realize how cool it is. And they made some changes to the electric interface back when Live 11 came up. But as far as I can tell, it's 100% the same thing. It just looks a little different than how it used to. So if you're just looking at the old way, this works the same way, but things are kind of divided up and work a little bit different here. So I want to talk about this for a little bit, but again, if anybody comes in and has questions or things to talk about, you are more than welcome to toss those things in the chat. Otherwise, it's just going to be me jamming out, talking about electric and why I think this is such a cool synthesizer. So the reason I think a lot of people don't use electric is that it's fairly specific in terms of its usage. Like it does a couple sounds really well. It doesn't have quite the same kind of breadth or variety of sounds that you can get out of another synthesizer like wavetable or operator. But the sounds that it does make, I think, sound really cool and are worth taking a look into. So by default, if you just load this bad boy up, sounds a little like that. It's a little quiet. Let me turn this up. It has this very kind of jazzy electric piano kind of feel to it, which is great. That's fantastic. It's super good at that kind of thing. It can also be used to make really cool bass sounds. It can be used to make really cool like bell kind of chime sounds. There's a few different things you can make with electric if you put your mind to it, but it's going to sound kind of like an old Rhodes or Wurlitzer electric piano, which if you're not aware of is probably one of the greatest instruments of all time. It sounds cool. It just always kind of works. So I highly encourage you guys to include more electric piano into your songs, into your own productions. And if you're going to, this is a great way to do it. So there's a few kind of like main things about this, and I'm still kind of getting used to the Live 11 interface. I'm much more used to the interface in Live 10. But there's basically a few different parts here. There's 3 different parts, basically. So you have your hammer, and this is based off of physical modeling, kind of like Collision. I released a video about Collision a couple weeks ago. So if you want to learn more about physical modeling and how that kind of works, check out that video because I think that's a good way to get started with it. But we're not going to be dealing with our regular kind of like oscillators, envelopes, filters, kind of synthesis stuff that you're used to. In this situation, it's going to be more designed to recreate this real world sound. So you either think about it that way. You think about it in terms of like, all right, we have the hammer, which is going to be the object we're hitting with. We have the fork, which is the object that's being hit. And then we have the damper / pickup, which allows us to kind of like play around with different kinds of distortion and dampen it and do stuff like that. So down here, there's this little diagram. This is the hammer hitting the fork, which is then resonating our sound. And then we have the damper / pickup, which is going to be allowing us to add some distortion or mute our sound a little bit. But that's basically it. Then you got a global section over here. So it's like those 4 sections with the main controls up here and then controls specific to whichever section you click on over here. So there's a few weird things about electric you need to know. Number 1, it is always velocity sensitive. Even if you turn off the velocity sensitivity, it will still be velocity sensitive. So just watch out for that. On top of that, much like a lot of other physical modeling devices, it will, if you affect the hammer, it will then affect how the resonator or the fork works. So watch out like how these different sounds kind of affect each other. So to start off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the volume of the fork and turn it down. The other weird thing about the way electric works is that this is the tone control. Controls the volume of that part, the tonal part of the electric piano. Even if you turn this all the way down to 0%, you can see you still get a little bit of it. So what we're hearing is a little bit of tone that's just left over there because even though it's at 0%, you still get it as part of your sound. But if I want to focus on the hammer, you can hear it at the beginning there. So if I want to take this stiffness and I want to turn this up on the hammer, we get this more kind of metallic chiming kind of sound. Whereas here it becomes very soft and doesn't really do a whole lot. So here it's like a little mallet. And then here it's much more metallic. So it's like that little bit of clicking sound right at the beginning of each note. That's what the hammer is controlling. So we got the stiffness control right here. And then we have noise. So if I turn this up, you'll be able to hear it a lot more. And as I change the stiffness, again, it'll be much louder now because we have more noise in there. So here, if I have very low stiffness and a lot of noise, that initial impact comes in as this very kind of noisy sound. So it's just a little like noise generator that goes on top of the sound of the hammer. That's basically it for these 2 controls. We do have a few other controls that go with them. So we have stiffness, which can be modified by either velocity or MIDI note. So as I play higher notes, it's going to have more stiffness. And as I play lower notes, it's going to have less stiffness. And same thing for velocity. As I hit it harder, it's going to have more stiffness. As I hit it softer, it's going to have less stiffness. And we have a few controls for our noise. And this is really helpful for making lots of different kinds of sounds here. So if I turn this up, you can kind of hear the sound, the pitch of the noise changing. So you can get much more kind of impactful hammer hits, as well as the decay here. So if this is longer, and if you set this up right, you can actually make like kick drums out of this. So you can make cool bass sounds with it. What's a pretty distinctive sound? So for creating percussive bongo congo sounds, are you talking about specifically with electric, or are you talking about just in general? Just like doing general kind of drum synthesis? Because I don't think I've ever tried to make like a bongo or congo kind of sound, but we can definitely try if you're into it. Let me just finish this one section of electric, and then we'll try it out. With electric specifically, I honestly I feel like I could synthesize some bongo congo percussive sounds on like operator pretty pretty well. On electric, honestly, I've never tried. I assume you probably could. Let me run through all the features of electric, and then we'll see if we can figure it out. My guess is this is not going to be the easiest way to make that kind of sound. I was saying earlier that like the thing about electric is that it's fairly limited in terms of its options. Like as you can see, there's like just like not a lot here to work with. So I don't foresee this being the easiest way to make congo sounds, but I'll definitely try it out. And then we have this force control over here for our hammer. So if we turn this up, we get more impact. Here we get less of that impact there. So those are basically controls. It's basically 5 controls here. So you have these 2 here, and then these 3 here, and then we have velocity mapping and keyboard mapping for all 3 of them, all built within the hammer. I feel like collision would probably be better for it than electric off the top of my head, but neither of them to me, like intuitively, I think bongo sounds when I think of those 2 synths. All right, so we're gonna take our noise 50%, stiffness 50%, everything 50%. And then we're gonna go over to the fork. There are 2 parts of the fork. There is the tine, which is gonna be the much more higher pitched bell sounding sound. And then we have the tone, which is the more kind of like tonal quality that you think of when you think of electric piano. So as we already heard, even if it tones at 0%, we still get a little bit of that. And it just gets louder as we turn this up. So a lot of what you're doing with electric is you're balancing out the volume of your hammer with the volume of your resonator here. And once again, even at 0%, we still get some of that tone. The tine is going to be the much higher pitch, and this at 0%, we get nothing of it. But as I turn this up, we get that higher pitched, more kind of bell chimey kind of sound, which is really nice. And of course, we could either do something like this where we are mostly focused on making that bell sound, or we can mix and match 2 of them together. Which I think sounds really cool. And as again, one of like the cool, interesting things about the electric piano sound and just in general is that you have this hammer that's hitting essentially 1 resonator, but we're getting 2 different parts of it. One is kind of like a lower octave one, and one's kind of like a higher octave metallic one. That allows us to control a lot about what we're hearing there. So the tine, we're going to take our tone all the way down. We have a color control and a decay. So color is going to affect the pitch. So as you turn this up or down, so here we get like this much kind of like harsher sound. Here you get a little bit muted, or somewhere in between. And of course, you have a decay time to make it really long or really short. And then we have the decay time on the tone. So take the tine, turn it back down, turn it all the way up. And we have the release. So if this is really low, as soon as I let go, it stops playing as I turn this up. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this release also affects the tine. Let me double check this. Yeah, so the release affects both of them. Even though it's in the tone section, it can affect the release of both of these 2 at the same time. So you can make your real quick sound. So yeah, Doesn't make like a lot of like huge crazy changes in here, but it's useful in terms of like the color control, release, that kind of stuff. But it's mostly just like you want to get your volumes here correctly for each one of these, and that's mostly how it's going to work. And then over here, we're going to have the damper / pickup section. So this is kind of like two different parts. We have the damper section right here, which has these three controls. And we have the pickup, which is effectively going to be allowing us to add distortion to our sound. So the damper, we'll go ahead and talk about this first, because this is just those three controls. So I believe if we turn the level up, you'll hear that when I let go of the note, it's going to have there's another little bit of the hammer. So you hammer once when you hit a note, and then once again when you let go. So essentially, as I'm letting go of the note, the damper is hitting the resonator and stopping it from resonating. So if we turn up way up there, we can really hear that. We can change the tone of it. So tone all the way up here makes it really high pitched. Tone way down here. Here we can't really hear it. And you get some attack and release as well. So if you want a little bit of damper on your sound, you can add it right here. It doesn't, again, hugely affect the sound, but it's like a cool, subtle little effect that's on there. What's up? It's Amy. So how do I start a song? Always stuck on that. So that's a really fantastic question. And one that there's not going to be one right answer to. So in general, the way that I recommend starting a song is starting with whatever inspires you the most in that moment. So this may depend a little bit on your background and what your experiences are and what you like to play. But if, for example, you're a vocalist and you just feel really inspired by vocals and lyrics and things like that, and that's what you're into, start with those. If you have a percussion background and you're really into drums and beats, then start with that, and that'll kind of like the thing that you're most excited about will open up a lot of doorways and avenues for other creative options to happen as you go through it. For me personally, in general, unless I'm really have like a melody in my mind or have something that really inspires me, I almost always start with drums first, mostly because I don't like the metronome. So if I have to play to the metronome, I think that's kind of boring and I'm not as into it. So I'll write a drum beat first, and then I will kind of like jam out, make a few beats, and then I have a rhythm that I can work with, and then I build everything else on top of that rhythm. So I do drums first, and then depending on my mood, generally I will do bass right after that, and then I'll do chords, or chords and bass, one of the two. And then after that, I will do my melodies. I generally save my melodies to a little bit farther on in the process once I have a better understanding of what the song is and what it's going to sound like. Mostly because melodies are probably one of the hardest things for me to write. I can crank out drum beats and bass lines and chord progressions all day, but melodies I'm really picky about, and I want to like make sure I really know what's going on. So sometimes it's helpful for me to start with melodies just to get out of the way early. Sometimes I like to save it a little bit, and that way I kind of know what I'm getting into, and I know kind of what the expectation and the foundation of the song is already there. But yeah, that's generally how I go about writing a song, is those kind of elements, and I mostly build them in the session view. So I'll just build up clips for each one of my tracks, and then kind of go from there. And if I like it, I'll take it from session view over to the arrangement view. But it's different for everybody, and there's no right way, there's no wrong way to start a song. It's really kind of just like, what are you into? What are you excited about? What's going to keep you focused on making music, and then focus on that. The other piece of information or piece of advice I'd like to give you is that when you're starting a song, it's all about momentum. So if you have to slow down to do a bunch of sound design, or if you slow down to do something, that can kill your momentum and then kill the song. So that's why I recommend starting with things that are easy for you, come naturally to you, or inspire you first, because then you'll just be able to like, okay, boom, here's a drum beat, next thing. Okay, boom, here's a bass line, next thing. And that I find is very, very important. If I start to second guess myself or doubt myself when it comes to writing a song, especially when I'm starting writing a song, it really kills my inspiration, it kills my momentum, and then it makes it much harder to actually write. So Start with the things that are easy for you, start with things that are fun for you, and then kind of go from there. Build a bunch of loops out of it and see where that takes you. So hopefully that answers your question. I know that's like a pretty deep question that could go a lot of different directions, but definitely feel free to let me know if you have any more questions about starting writing a song. I also made a video a while back about like writing a song in 30 minutes in Ableton Live. So you can check that out and you kind of see some of the process that I use for writing tracks. What's up, Jimmy Flippins? How you doing? So I know that if you record while monitoring, it records the latency. So it's good to record with monitor off. That is 100% correct. Have you noticed that MIDI is the same though? I've noticed the MIDI is the same. Honestly, I have not noticed this. For me, MIDI latency and audio latency are two different things. And MIDI latency, like audio latency, is caused by one set of things happening, and MIDI latency is usually caused by a different set of things happening. If you've noticed that you get better latency with the monitor off as opposed to in, that's fantastic. But if we try testing this out, because now I'm curious to see what happens here. If we take MIDI and we'll do, this might not make any difference because we're recording internally inside of Live. But I want to test this out. So we have MIDI coming in here, and we're receiving MIDI from this MIDI track. And we have monitoring on. There's not gonna be any latency here. But again, this is internally, so I don't do a lot of externally recording MIDI, but there's zero latency there. And then if I am monitoring off, there's also going to be zero latency here. I suppose I could try the same thing coming from the push if we put this in like drum mac mode. Actually, that still won't make a difference there because the push is like kind of connected. Yeah, so I'm not gonna have a way to like test it with quantized MIDI going into from my push, because the push is already going to be built in quantized in the MIDI clip inside of Live. They're already kind of synced together. So I'd have to like go dig out a MIDI controller from my closet that has a arpeggiator or a sequencer built into it to double check it. But instinctively, based off of what I know about MIDI and MIDI latency, is I don't think the monitoring here will affect the MIDI in the same way monitoring for audio will. But I would love to do more tests and get back to you on it and kind of see if I notice anything else that is causing latency there, and if monitoring off fixes it. But I generally have not had a lot of issues with MIDI latency in my current setup. It's a really good question though. I'll definitely want to look into it because a lot of times I found like MIDI latency can be caused by like a lot of other things and not necessarily the monitor settings when I do encounter it. What's up, Hef? So MIDI effects latency should also really not be an issue generally. Live has built-in like latency compensation. So for example, we have a note like this, and we run it through our arpeggiator. And we record over to this track. Well, there's monitor auto or off. I gotta hit the play on the thing. you're not going to have any latency in there. So Vishnu, if we're looking specifically at MIDI latency, then a synth here is not going to be necessary because we're mostly just looking for the timing of the MIDI from the original track versus the timing of the MIDI on the new track. Once you add synths in, then there is going to be some amount of latency in there that the synth is going to cause. Zoom in one here. Yeah, it's pretty spot on. But if the synth is causing latency, that's not MIDI latency. That's just latency from the synth, which can be kind of a different thing. But yeah, MIDI latency, I think is really interesting. But I think people often overestimate how often MIDI latency happens. Usually, if it's happening, it's because of some kind of hardware or cable or connection issue. Is generally when I find MIDI latency happens the most. But these are great questions. Keep them coming if you have more you want to talk about. So I got a question about, can you explain how many bars a beat should be, I'm assuming? Interesting, Jimmy. We'll take a look at it some more. So question was, how many bars should a beat be? I'm assuming. I think that's what the question was. It's really up to you and the style of music you're making and what you're into. I generally like my beats to be either 4 bars or 8 bars. No worries, Jimmy. I often find that if I write something that is 2 bars, it's like 1 bar is obviously too short because just the exact same thing over and over again gets really boring. 2 bars can be okay. Normally 4 bars is kind of where I'm leaving it for the most part. And then I'll, like, especially in a 4-bar beat, add a little bit of extra variation at the last bar. So add a little extra drum fills, little extra thing there, and then it'll kind of loop from there. If I'm writing at a faster tempo, then I might make it 8 bars. So if you like writing at high tempos, 8 bars makes a lot of sense to me. I generally tend to write at slower tempos. So 4 bars is kind of my magic number for how long my beat should be. But it'll vary. 2, 4, or 8 is usually the right answer when it comes to writing a beat, I think. I often find that like 16-bar beats, it ends up taking a long time to write it, and you end up not getting as much out of it as opposed to just, 2 8-bar beats that just kind of repeat themselves and have a little bit of extra things going on there. So hopefully that answers your question. If you want to, I made a video about some really basic techniques for writing beats on the channel a few months back. So you can check that out, and I kind of go over how I like to really quickly write beats. Or if you're into it, you can just let me know, and I'll show you some techniques for writing beats. In fact, let me do this real quick, since it seems like a good topic. And once again, if anybody is just joining us and would like to pop in, ask a question, you're more than welcome to toss that in the chat. That's what I'm here for. So say I'm writing a beat here. This is how I'm gonna start my song. Oftentimes what I'll do is I will start with a 1-bar loop. And let me slow this down a bit. And I'm gonna put in what I basically consider like the skeleton of a drum beat, right? So it's gonna be my kicks, my snares, my hi-hats. So maybe it'll be something like this. And where's my hi-hat? Here. So this is gonna be the basic premise for my beat, something like this. right? Very simple, very straightforward, kind of boring, nothing to write home about yet, but it gets the basic idea of the beat across, right? But it's only one bar. So then what I'll do is I will hit the duplicate button right here. This is going to duplicate everything in that one bar, and now I have bar number 2, which is exactly the same as bar number 1. Now what I do here is I will start moving things around a little bit. Maybe I will add in an extra kick right here, and maybe I'll move this one here, and maybe I'll add in one here, and maybe add an extra hi-hat here, something like that. So it's mostly the same thing, but it's a little bit different. In fact, let me actually do this. So bar 1, bar number 2 is 80% the same as bar number 1, but it's a little bit different. I just moved some kick drums around, added extra hi-hat. You can come up with whatever little simple basic variation you want. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the duplicate loop button again. So now bar 1 and bar 3 are exactly the same. Bar 2 and bar 4 are exactly the same. And now that I'm over here in bar number 4, I'm going to create yet another little bit of variation. So maybe I'll move this kick here, and maybe I'll move that one there, and maybe I'll put that one back there. So again, mostly the same. So now in this case, this one and this one are exactly the same. This one is a slight variation on this one, and this one is a slight variation on this one. And ultimately what this gets me, let me actually add some snares here too, something like that, is we get a drum beat that has the basic core the basic rhythmic core is there, right? The kicks are mostly in the same places, the snares are in the same places, the hats are mostly in the same places. So if somebody's trying to dance to this or they're like grooving out to it, it mostly maintains the same functional rhythmic core. However, we added a little bit of variation here and a little bit of variation here, so it doesn't sound like the exact same 1-bar loop all over again, right? And now that I have this 4-bar loop, I can start looping it multiple times in a row if I want to fill up 8 bars or 16 bars or however many bars. Or I can start making different variations in different clip slots, which is something I'll do quite a bit, where I'll duplicate the whole clip. And maybe on this one, I will have 8th note hi-hats instead of the off-time 8th note hi-hats. So you can come up with like multiple different variations based off of that one-bar loop that you wrote really, really quickly. And then I'll duplicate it again, and maybe I'll just do a straight up 16-note version. And now I can jump around between, in this case, I have 3 4-bar loops that I made very, very quickly without a lot of headache, and then boom, there's my beat. So hopefully that helps answer your question a little bit in terms of how long you want your beats to be. Like I said, I usually find 4 bars is kind of the sweet spot where it gives me enough to add in like little bits of variations, little bits of flourishes in there without having to spend a long time coming up with like a really long drum beat. Although theoretically, if I wanted to, I could just do the exact same thing one more time, duplicate the loop, and then on the second half here, come up with some more variations, and then it's, again, mostly the same drum beat, and then there you are. Yeah, I like that concept a lot too, having multiple drum beats or multiple kits, and then have it randomized between the two of them as it's playing. You can do that with a lot of like cool break beats and things like that. You can chop up a break beat and then have it jump back and forth between different ones. It's a really great way to get some cool like drum and bassy kind of frenetic drum sounds as well. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the basics of writing drum beats pretty quickly. This is not always how I write my drum beats. In fact, a lot of the time when I'm writing my drum beats, I'll just finger drum them. on my MIDI controller, and then kind of go from there. But if I'm just like, I just real quick need to have a drum beat in here, this is a really nice technique for doing so. The other thing I will mention about this technique is that these are very much placeholder drums. And I think the concept of using placeholder sounds in your productions is not only like good, but I actually encourage it, because a lot of times when you sit down, you have to spend a long time coming up with your drum beat. It kills your momentum, as we talked about earlier. So being able to just plug in some drums that are good enough for you to write the rest of your song, and then you go back and then you tweak the drums later on, is, I think, actually a really smart, effective way to write sounds. It's just, okay, placeholder drums, I got a 4-bar beat here, good to go, move on to the next thing. And then once I like this song and I kind of know what the song's going to sound like, then you can go in and tweak all the drums and perfect them to be perfect. So somebody's asking, how do I slip edit audio on both session and arrangement view? As in move the audio left to right within the waveform. Well, the waveform stays in place. I'm assuming you mean move the waveform left and right while the clip stays in place. What's up, Tripathi? How are you doing today? So the way one would do that, and let's see if I remember the right key command so I don't tell you the wrong one here. All right. Oh, that's going to drive me nuts. It's like a combination of buttons that I'm not remembering off the top of my head. That's embarrassing. There we go. It's Alt Shift allows you to move the waveform back and forth here. And it was some combination of two things. Moves the waveform around, but keeps the clip where it is. And it's quantized, so if you were to like turn off your grid, you can just move it exactly wherever you want. However, I don't think this works in the session view. I think this is only arrangement view. But let me double check to make sure I'm not lying to you. Yeah, it doesn't work in the session view. So yeah, that's the key command for doing that. I always forget about it. I like never use that as a way to move things around. I just tend to adjust things other ways. I think if you are in the session view, you literally just have to move the clip start wherever you want just by adjusting it up here. That's gonna be probably the best way to do it. That's a good question though. Oops. Yeah, and so if anybody is just joining us and has any questions or things they want to talk about, feel free to toss those questions in the chat. That's kind of what I'm here for. While we were waiting for more questions to chat, I might go back to talking a little bit about electric. This is what I was talking about at the start of the stream. For those of you guys who are not aware, electric is a really fantastic little synthesizer that really, it kind of only does a couple things, but it does those things really well. So it's designed to sound like an electric piano. I don't know why I was doing that weird glide. Oh, I know why. My headphone control is hitting the pitch control. So before, early in the stream, we talked about the hammer, we talked about the fork, and now we're talking about the damper, which I'm going to turn down. And then the pickup. So the pickup is basically going to be, what's up, Garrison? How you doing? So Garrison's asking, what does consolidating actually do? So consolidating creates an entirely new clip for you. So for example, if I wanted to consolidate this little bit here, and I consolidate it. So if I were to just slice it like this, right? Editing in live is non-destructive. So I can always just pull this back out and then boom, the rest of the clip is still there, right? Same thing for this right here. Once you consolidate it, it essentially re-records an entirely new clip of whatever you consolidated. So if I consolidate that there, this is now a totally separate clip. It basically, anything that you chop off is no longer there. It doesn't exist anymore. On top of that, when you save your session, so when you save it, inside of your samples folder, so inside my project folder, in my samples folder, there will now be a processed and consolidated folder. So it makes an entirely new clip for you that only includes the area as part of it. Yes, it does duplicate it. So this sample, the original version of this sample, does still live in my samples folder. The consolidated version now lives in the project folder here. Generally, when you're consolidating, you're chopping off the ends. So if you had like a really long clip you recorded that's like 3 minutes long, but you only needed like 8 bars of that 3-minute recording you did, that would be a good situation where you want to like, okay, we're going to consolidate it. It just gets this one little bit. There's nothing on either side of it now, as opposed to when you do your non-destructive editing, it's all still there. But yeah, that's what consolidating does. Creates an entirely new file for you, puts it in your project folder underneath these samples. And it's generally really good for taking really long samples and then kind of turning them into their own file. So what happens when you freeze a track or a stem? So freezing a track essentially is going to take everything that's on that track. So if I have multiple samples here, and it's going to re-record it to audio, including any effects or things that are going on with that track. So for example, if I were to put some delay on this just so we can kind of see it, we have those 2 kicks there. That's some delay to it. So if I were to freeze it, it's going to take all of the MIDI that's on this track or audio, as well as all of the effects, re-record it as an audio file. So just by freezing it, it already did the recording for me. And we can tell if we once again go back to our project folder, underneath samples, processed, we now have freeze. That's one of the options. So this is where it gets recorded to. And then here it's going to be the freezing of that entire track. So everything is on it, all the effects, everything. And you can see that here now that like it adds this little gray area with the like lines on it. That's because the actual sample itself only went from here to here. But because I put a delay on it, the delay echoes out all the way through here. So this is actually like indicating that there is sound still happening here. And here's the weird thing about a frozen track, is that a frozen track is somewhere in between worlds here, where what we are looking at represents what's on the old track, right? The delay here, the sounds that are here. So if we change our mind and want to go back and tweak an effect or do something like that, because right now on a frozen track, I can't do anything to it. I can always just right click and hit unfreeze, which means I can go through, I can move this stuff around, I can change settings here, whatever I want. And then if I freeze it again, it's going to re-record it again and create a new audio file for me. Now, if I want to actually flatten it, if I want to actually turn it into fully just that audio track, if I right click again and hit flatten track, we can see that here is our sound with the delay. but the delay no longer exists. Everything is now baked in there. The only way to get a flattened track back to its frozen state is to hit Command Z. So if you keep on working on a track, and then you want to get either that audio or that MIDI back from the way it was, you have to undo all that stuff to get it back. So I generally recommend save a new version, or do a new save before you flatten a track, because the only way to get it back is to undo it. So the point of freezing it is, in a lot of ways, number one is to take like MIDI tracks current to audio. Number two, it can save you a bunch of CPU. So if you have a track that has a bunch of effects on it, say you have like just a stack of effects on it, and it sounds really cool, but it's slowing your computer down. If you freeze that track, that should solve the CPU issues on that track, because instead of running your sound through a bunch of processing, which takes real-time processing and takes computer energy to do that, it's just playing an audio track. So it's a great way to save CPU issues if you're running into those a lot when you are making your sounds. I tend to do a lot more freezing when it comes to MIDI. So like I'll write something with MIDI with a bunch of effects on it, and then I'll freeze it to make my life a little easier. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Freezing is super, super useful. So Garrison's asking, I like to take 1,000,000 tries in one recording on loop to get a single take. And I thought actually deleting the millions of other takes there technically in each project. Yeah, cropping will do that for you. That'll definitely save you a lot of computer space. The other thing that you can do is, once you crop it, so say you have your long recording and then you crop it, this is kind of the next thing you're asking about. There's a way to delete unused files, which is really, really useful. I made a video about it a while back. It's actually one of my more popular videos. So the way this works, and it should be fine, what we're going to do is go to File and hit Manage Files. And then it's going to give you 3 options. You might not be able to see it because it's behind my head, but it says Manage Set, Manage Project, Manage User Library. So if you hit Manage Project, it's going to analyze your project file. It's going to tell you that, how many live sets you have, how many clips you have, how many media files you have, all that kind of stuff. If there are any missing files, it'll tell you about missing files here. If there are any external files versus internal files. So this one has 1 external file, some sample from somewhere, 19 from factory packs. That's cool. And then down here, it says unused files. It says there are 3 files worth 8.3 megabytes in this project that are not being used by any sets, clips, or presets. Which means if you, say you record a bunch of stuff, so what you're doing, you record a bunch of one long thing on a loop, right? And then you just want that one 8-bar section. Once you crop it and then save your project and delete all of the other things out of it, all the other things that are on either side of your sample, those files will now show up in the unused files option. So what you can do now that you're here is hit the show button here. They pop up over here. You select them, just move them to the trash. And then boom, you just saved yourself a bunch of space on your computer. So if you have any questions about it, check out the video I made about deleting unused files. If you do a lot of recording that way, and you're noticing your projects are taking up a lot of space on your computer, 100% try this out. It's really easy to do once you kind of get used to it. Garrison, unfortunately, there's not going to be a way to do it to multiple projects at a time. You have to do it one project at a time. So it might be the kind of thing where it's mostly worth it moving forward, and it's not going to be really worth it to go back to old projects to do it. But once you get used to the process, once you kind of figure it out, you can do a project in like a minute or 2. So up to you whether you want to go back and do it, but I would definitely recommend moving forward as you're recording stuff to to go through, delete unused files. I used to work with this vocalist, and she just used to record herself doing everything all the time. And then I noticed her projects were like 2 gigs per project, and I was like, why are your projects so huge? And we went through and deleted and cleared up like, I don't know, I don't forget how many gigs worth of stuff off of her computer, and her computer was all of a sudden like running way faster. All right. So Emma is asking, how do you reduce latency from monitoring? I made another video about this a little while ago. I don't think I actually made a video about it. I think I talked about it on stream. So when you are recording audio into live, and I'm not gonna be able to demonstrate this super effectively right now because I don't have like an audio input set up right now. But essentially, something like this. If I'm recording from my audio interface on one of these inputs here, we have 3 different monitoring settings, right? We have monitor in, which is always looking for input. We have monitor auto, which is looking for input for record enable. And we have monitor off, which is kind of the same thing as auto, but it won't output it. Right? Those are our 3 monitor settings. Now, for the longest time, I used in or auto. And then I realized once I was doing a bunch of stuff that it was sequenced from my modular synthesizer, that no matter what I did, the latency coming in from in or auto was about 13 milliseconds. Doesn't matter what setting I had, I could tweak all the settings all day long, and it was just like 13 milliseconds was the lowest I could get it. And I looked into it some more, and Live has this delay compensation option right here. What they don't tell you about the delay compensation is this only works if your monitor is set to off. That's basically it. That's all you really need to know. Even when I was using the reduced latency when monitoring, didn't affect anything for me. Still was like 13 milliseconds latency. So delay compensation turned on, monitor set to off, and then when you record, you will not be able to hear your recording as you're recording it, unfortunately. However, your latency will be, I got to basically 0. I think it was like 1 millisecond or like 2 milliseconds of latency. So that worked for me, and I highly recommend trying it out, because if you tweak all your settings and you're still getting that extra little bit of latency that shouldn't be there, set your monitor off and then try it. And theoretically, what you could do, and I need to double check this to make sure this works right. If you need to hear yourself recording, have one track with monitor in, and this is the one you would actually be hearing, right? And then the other track, record enabled, monitor off, and this is when you would record to. Theoretically, I think that'll still work, although I need to double check that to make sure. But yeah, that's basically the gist of it. Try monitor off. It's magical. It works way better than the other 2 for some reason. Do that stuff in each project that is being played. All right, so I can never perfectly bounce a project. How can I bounce a project within loop markers? Every time it will be plus minus 3 to 5 seconds. Interesting. So what you're saying to me is that when you are bouncing a project, say your song is 49 bars long. That's your length, right? And so I'm assuming what you're doing is you're putting loop brace on, you're selecting like this, you're going to your export settings, and then you are exporting. The big thing to be aware of that you have to watch out for, because it should be exactly the number of bars you selected to output. It shouldn't be 3 to 5 seconds less or longer. It should always be exactly whatever you output as. The thing you need to watch out for is your render start and your render length. These will automatically be selected based off of the amount of time you have selected in your project. So for example, if you have this amount of area highlighted and you go to export it, we're bouncing bar 1 to bar 46 because that's the area I have selected. Even though the loop brace goes to 49, Live doesn't automatically set the length based off of the loop brace. It bases it off how long you have selected. So same thing here. If I were to do something like this, where I extend a little bit over, and then I try exporting, is doing bar 1 to bar 52. So most likely that's the issue. That's most likely why it's being a little bit short or long, because it is selected to be a certain length. If you click on the loop brace, it should select that area automatically. So now you go in here and you can check your bounce and you can see it's, once again, 48 bars, which is what we want. So when in doubt, double check the length you have selected. You can always, of course, go in here and manually adjust it as you need to. But this should be the exact amount of time that it gets exported every single time. So try that out. Let me know how it goes. But for the most part, bounce length should be spot on. So Trader Dog is asking, is there a way to combine 2 different live sets and preserve send returns from each? Hold on, Trader Dog, let me get to that 1 second. Yeah, so when we're exporting here, it starts at bar 1 and it's going to bar 49, which means it should be 48 bars long because we're starting with 1. So if I select that area and hit export here, the length is 48 bars, which is just what we want. Same thing if I was going to like bar 53, it should be 52 bars. So just keep that in mind. But it just kind of depends on how long your song is going to be. So Trail Donkey, what you could do, there's a number of ways to combine different sessions together. Combining return tracks can be kind of a pain. So one thing you can do is you could go to like a project you're already working on. And this will not display the sends and returns when I do this, unfortunately. So probably the best way to do this is to open up a project. So let's open up this one. We'll give this a second to open up. Come on, I just want your return tracks. So say I want these 3 return tracks. These are my return tracks on my template. I can just Command-C to copy them. Go to my other project, in this case is a new one. No, it didn't paste them. Weird. Let's try that one more time. Melodic mouse, Shift Tab is what you want to be able to change between the clip view and the device view. So if we have a clip down here, if I hit Shift Tab, it goes back and forth between device view and clip view. Weird, it is not letting me copy and paste return tracks from one session to another. And what if I drag this whole thing in? I'm gonna try a few experiments here, see if we can make this work. Yeah, even if you grab that entire thing, it doesn't give you the return tracks. Very interesting. Yeah, Chowdoggy, I'll have to get back to you on this one. This is a really fascinating question. I honestly had not run into this situation when working on stuff, is combining return tracks from one project to another. I would think that you could just copy and paste them, but that definitely did not work. And you can't grab them from the project folder, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm going to assume that there is an easy way to do this, but I will have to get back to you on what that easy way is. Yeah, fascinating question there. You stumped me. Because you can definitely copy and paste tracks from one project to another, which makes you think you could copy and paste a return track from one track to another, but it definitely did not let me. Yeah, I think honestly what you may have to do, this project one more time. So yeah, probably off the top of my head, what you may have to do here is copy the devices on one return track. All right, so I take one return track here, I copy these devices, I open up my new project or my other project, I make a new return track, I paste those devices in there, and then I have to individually redo the sends. That, off the top of my head, is probably the fastest way to do it, but that's still a massive pain in the ass, especially if you have multiple returns that you're trying to use. The other thing that I could recommend doing, and this is what I've been doing for a long time and why this has never been an issue for me, is using a template that has all of your different kinds of return tracks built in there. What's up, Nercall? How you doing? So I have my production template that I'm using that has the same return tracks that I constantly use all the time. So I have 3 of them over here. Again, you might be able to see them because they're up behind my head. And then use this template, and that way if you need to combine 2 projects, I'm using basically the same return tracks on all of them. So I can just kind of swap them back and forth without having to copy and paste return tracks around. So that's probably what I recommend as a way to make your life easier, is to build a template that you use all the time. And then if you're combining one project to another project, all you need to do is add those tracks in there and then turn up the send knobs for those tracks. So that'd be another way to try to deal with that. Yeah, so Garrison, unused files are basically any sample that is not being used in any ALS file. So for example, if actually, let's go to our test save guy. Yeah, no worries, Garrison. That's literally what I'm here for. All right, so let's try as an example. If I record on this track, so I recorded this audio file here. There's nothing on it, but I'm recording something. So here's this audio file, right? Now, if I were to hit save, or if I were to delete this audio file and then hit the save key command, that green audio file that I just recorded does not exist in this ALS file. It's not been saved in here. It still exists on my hard drive. So let's check this out here. So if I get my test save, and so in my samples, we have processed and recorded. So here's that file I just made. Still exists on my hard drive, still taking up space. It doesn't exist in this project, which means now when I go to manage files and manage project, one recording will show up here, and then I can of course go in here and delete this guy. So that's one option, right? Where just the file was recorded, meaning it exists in the project folder, but it's not being used in the saved version of the project. Another example of this would be, say we're doing kind of a situation like what you're doing, where you are recording to the arrangement view. So we're recording our file here. And then you're like, all right, this is the section I want. This is the good section. This is garbage. This is garbage. So what we're gonna do is we're going to Command J to consolidate it. We're gonna delete this guy out of here. We're gonna delete this guy out of here. Now, because this is a new audio file, this will still exist. This will not show up in my unused files. The two sections I just deleted, if I hit the save button first, it's really important that you save it before you check your manage files. And then once again, I go to manage files, manage project. And weird, it's not giving anything there. That should be showing up there. It's not that. Let's try that one more time. Weird, it's not showing that up there. But theoretically, the concept here is that the consolidated version is still saved in the project file, which means it won't show up over here. The things that got deleted on either side should show up here because they were deleted and they are not in any version of this project. Hopefully that makes sense. Whereas if I were to just to do this and this, just by deleting that part and that part, those will not show up here because they're still part of this file. This file, if any part of this file exists, it's not going to show up in the unused files. I know, it's kind of weird. It takes a little getting used to, but that's the concept there. Sweet. So I think I've caught up on everybody's questions. Chiado, you most certainly, if you haven't already, should try building a template. Templates are a fantastic way, just an absolutely amazing way to save yourself a bunch of time, a bunch of headache, and get better songs out of it. So you can definitely organize yourself to make a little template that has a couple return tracks to end up using quite a bit. Sweet. So again, if anybody is just joining us and would like to ask any questions or things that they want to talk about, go ahead and put those things in the chat. I'm going to get back to talking about electric, but feel free, you're more than welcome to interrupt me with any questions you got. All right, so electric, we talked about the hammer, which is going to be our object we're hitting with, our fork, which is the object we're hitting, and then we have the pickup section, which is basically like, think of like the pickup on an electric guitar, but it's also going to allow us to add some distortion here, which is one of the cool things about electric, is that not only do you get this very like kind of cleaner kind of sound, you can also distort it and make it sound really crazy. So there are two different modes for your pickup, the R mode and the W mode. One is the electrostatic and one is the electro something else. The important thing you need to know is that the R makes it sound like the Rhodes piano, and the W makes it sound like the Wurlitzer. So the Rhodes and Wurlitzer are basically two really famous electric pianos, and these are modeled off of the pickups on either one of them. So both are cool, both sound good. It's really up to you whichever one you want to be using. Then we have this symmetry control, which ultimately, like, it's like not quite a filter, but like as you turn it up, it definitely like muffles it a bit. Or if it's turned up, it's not as muffled, or turned down, it's not as muffled. And keep in mind that, like I said, even if you turn off all the velocity sensitivity, it's still very velocity sensitive. So if I hit softer notes, it's a bit cleaner, but if I hit it harder, you get this much more kind of distorted sound. It's kind of like the dynamic tube. If you've ever used the dynamic tube, if you send a quiet sound into the dynamic tube, it is not very distorted at all. But if you send a loud sound through it, it is much more distorted. Same kind of idea here. If you hit it softer, it's going to be much cleaner. If you hit it harder, you get much more distorted sound. We also have a distance control here, which if I hit it soft, it sounds really far away. But if I hit it really hard, it sounds really distorted. So between these different modes, you can get a lot of different like kinds of sounds out of this. On top of that, we have an input control and an output control. So input control means more volume going into our distortion, which means, or more volume going to our pickup, which means more distortion. And then we can use this to control the output. So really fun controls for getting like a lot of different kind of tonal qualities out of electric. You can hear it sounds like way different, depending on how you have this set up. Nice, Garrison. Like I said, that video that I made on deleting unused files, I was just like a video. I was like, whatever, who cares? Like, it's not that big of a deal. But it's become one of my most popular videos on the channel that I've made, and it seems like the kind of thing that people just need to know about. Oh, and thank you so much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. Oh yeah, if you're recording audio, you got to know about the manage file setting. This is such a big deal here. So that's basically it for electric. If you go into the global section here, we have like really basic controls like number of voices, tuning, pitch bend, detune, pretty standard stuff there. But yeah, that's kind of basically it for electric. As you can see, it does one sound really well, which is the electric piano sound. It can do a few other sounds. You can make some really cool bass sounds with it, depending on how you have it set up. You can make kick drums out of it. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. Also really good for bell sounds. If you like turn this up and you play, can be a really cool, pretty way to like make some interesting melodic elements into your track, even if you're not going for like the smooth electric piano kind of thing. It's a really fun, easy way to like make some cool stuff this way. And, like, it has like a very interesting tonal quality to it as well. Like, it doesn't really sound like a lot of other things out there, or like Collision, for example. So yeah, really underappreciated synth. Does a lot of cool stuff, but is a little bit limited in terms of what it does. At some point, I'll probably make a video about electric, talking about all that kind of stuff, because I think it's really cool. Maybe this week I'll make one. Sweet. So once again, if anybody is just joining us and they have questions or things that they would like to talk about, feel free to toss those questions in the chat, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. Actually, let's take this beat I made, and let's play some stuff with it. Hi, that's somebody screwing around. So yeah, so I think it seems like we got through everybody's questions, things people wanted to get into. I will probably hang out for a few more minutes to see if anybody else pops by and has things they want to get into, but I appreciate everybody who showed up today, hit the like button, who, you know, just anybody who asked questions, because without you guys, this stream is, it's really boring. I also do want to mention that I will be streaming again tomorrow for Patreon members. So if you're a Patreon member, you know what the deal is, but those guys are not Patreon members, I definitely recommend checking out. I do an extra Tuesday stream where I do production stuff, and you guys can also come in, ask questions, and hang out, and just be around. And then on Wednesday, I do a song feedback stream where people will send me tracks they're working on, and I will give them feedback. And you are more than welcome to pop by and send me your tracks on Wednesday. Symbolic Mouse said, is there a way to key command for MIDI capture and crop selection? I'm assuming you mean like MIDI capture, like this guy right here, where it captures all of the MIDI. And then if you want a crop selection, unfortunately, there's no key command for it. So say I really like this section right here. What you want to do is loop it first, and then right click and hit crop clip. And that'll crop it to just that one section. If you are in the arrangement view, you can just hit Command J and that'll work. So if I have this over here, and it goes like this, and it goes like this, turn loop off. So say I want to, if we're in the arrangement view and I want to just keep this section here, so say I want this section here, you can just hit Command J and that will crop the area you have selected. So now this is separate, and now this is just by itself. So in arrangement view, same key command as normal, Command J for consolidate. And in session view, loop the section first, then right click and hit crop sample. I wish there's a key command for it in the session view, but there's not. Yeah, Shabati, you are more than welcome to ask a question. That's why I like to give the little like warning that I'm going to be calling it soon. So that way, if anybody has any more questions, you can come in and ask them. But Melodic Mouse, let me know if that does not answer your question, if you're talking about something a little different. Off the top of my head, I have not. I know that there are a million sidechain plugins out there. Oh, Kickstart, yeah. So I have personally not used it, but it looks exactly like all of the other sidechain plugins that are out there. No worries, Melodic Mouse. So yeah, so there are lots of different sidechain plugins out there. Most of them are not free, but most of them do basically the exact same thing. So there are tons of them. The one I was using for a long time was the infected mushroom one. Now I'm not blank on the name of it. Gatekeeper is the one I was thinking about. I was using Gatekeeper for a long time. Works great. I've switched to using DuckBuddy because it is free and it's in Max for Live. This came out fairly recently and basically does the exact same thing. You grab an input from whatever channel you want, usually your kick drum, and then you can adjust the shape of it in here. You can adjust the shape, you can adjust the length, all that kind of stuff. I know a lot of people, when it comes to sidechain plugins, they have their one sidechain plugin that is the magical one that works better than everything else. Honestly, in my opinion, most sidechain plugins are nearly identical in terms of functionality and what they can do. And if there is a difference between any of them, it is fairly subtle. So it's mostly about interface and design and what kind of works well for you and what you're going for. I'm honestly not sure if it works with Ableton 10. I think it only works with Ableton 11 based off of the real quick Googling I did. So most likely this is not going to work on 10. But yeah, try out different ones. A lot of these plugins you can get free sample, like trial versions for it. So try out a few of them and see if there's any that kind of stick out to you that you think work really well. I had a great time with Gatekeeper. I think Gatekeeper works great. One of the things I really like about Gatekeeper is you can sidechain to MIDI instead of sidechaining to audio. You could use something kind of like Shaper to do that as well. The nice things about these plugins is like there's no other really setup. You just set up your input, you tweak your curve a little bit as needed, and you're basically good to go. Whereas a sidechain with Shaper, unless you're doing like a basic 4 on the floor thing. So what you could do with Shaper I've actually done this with AutoPan too. Is you can kind of do something like this, and then map this to the volume of something. Like that. I wouldn't do the volume here. I'd probably do a volume on a utility. It's probably the better way to do it. So toss the utility there, map this to the gain, go up to 50%. And if you're just doing like a 4 on the floor thing, then this will work because this will just duck it on those quarter notes or however often you want to set it up to be. A smaller grid size, so you could do something like that. That would also work. That would like get the job done. Another way that I have done this, like I said, was with AutoPan. If you turn the amount up and the phase down, this will turn the volume up and down. So you essentially could set this up to be on quarter notes. And you adjust the offset here so that it goes down at the start of each quarter note. And that way it's kind of doing the same thing this is here, except for the curve is more kind of like up and down like this. So we can test these out actually. These on a MIDI track and just put a wavetable in here. So the pitch thing is hitting it. So this AutoPan is just bouncing this up and down. Let's put a 4 on the floor thing here just so we can kind of test this out. So the AutoPan here it's doing it, but it's not like super on time there, right? Like I have to tweak the settings a little bit more to like dial it in a bit better. The Shaper though should work pretty well. Like that sounds like a decent sidechain. And if you wanted to, like I said, you could adjust the curve here a bit. Like that. Make the grid size smaller or longer or whatever. Why is that not working? What happened here? This is being weird. There is a live 10 version of Shaper, for sure. So you could try it like that. But like I said, there's a little more setup. If you find yourself like that's too much of a pain, you don't feel like doing that all the time, just grab one of those plugins. Most of the sidechain plugins are fairly affordable because they're not super complicated. Yeah, like the Nicky Romero one is like $15. It's like, yeah, try it. $15 is not a big deal. So yeah, I'd look into those plugins, but I've never found like a huge, amazing difference between any of the sidechain options that are out there. They all basically do the same thing. They all basically have the same functionality. It's kind of up to you to figure out kind of which one fits best with your own workflow and how you like to use it. But the nice thing about this version is that it is free. Just Shaper plus utility. Makes your life super easy. Yeah, I'm totally cool with you giving me $15 as well instead of Nicky Romero. Nicky Romero probably has plenty of money, whereas I don't. Sweet, but yeah, hopefully that answers your question about sidechain plugins. I'll see if there's any other free ones that are out there. Yeah, I know DuckBuddy is free, but it's only Live 11. I'll see if there's any other third-party ones that are out there that are free or free-ish that'll do the same thing. You also could just do this with a compressor too. That's really the thing about those sidechain plugins is they're literally just compressors. So I many a time will just use the sidechain function on the compressor, and it does the exact same thing. Just turn on sidechain here, grab from your kick. Yeah, same thing. So you don't need a fancy plugin to do it. You can just use a regular compressor. You can use the glue compressor. You can use this compressor. You can use the multi-band dynamics. They all have the same functionality built into it. All of the sidechain plugins that are designed to do this are literally just this, but the interface is designed specifically for sidechaining, as opposed to being a compressor that can also sidechain. And I have for many years, and still occasionally will just use the compressor for sidechaining. Sweet. Well, I think I've gotten through everybody's questions, everything everyone talked about today. So once again, thank you guys for popping by and saying hi and asking me all these great, fantastic questions. And I will hopefully see you guys tomorrow for the Patreon stream. If not, I'll probably see you on Wednesday for a song feedback stream. For some reason, Wednesday streams, the feedback streams, have been sometimes we get a lot of people in there, and sometimes we don't get very many at all. So I'm trying to figure out why that's happening. But I want to hear your tracks. So send me what you're working on Wednesday. But have a good afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. And hopefully I'll see you again real soon.